After my personal struggle with food left me sick and suicidal, I was struck with the realization that food alone can't fix us. So I set out to discover what could, and what I found changed everything. After coaching thousands of clients and interviewing the world's leading experts, I realized it was time to start a bigger conversation. What are you really hungry for?
It's great.
Ooh, good one.
What am I really hungry for?
I love that question.
It's time to discover what you're really hungry for. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to succeed in life and others fail? Some believe that it comes down to skill, to who you know, or that it's just pure luck or talent. But in reality, none of these things determine your success in the end. What really separates the successful people from those who fail is that the successful people look at their success as the path they travel, not just the finish line. For them, it's about the journey, not the destination. It's about being persistent and continuing to move forward, sideways, and sometimes even backward. But they keep moving. Now, that being said, I also want you to know that persistence isn't about doing the same thing over and over and getting the same results. That's called insanity. Persistence is learning from the bumps, the potholes, and the boulders in the road and implementing those lessons you're learning as you keep moving forward. Portia Nelson wrote a great poem that illustrates this idea beautifully. She wrote, "I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes me a long time to get out. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. I walk down another street." When you keep walking down the road and falling in the holes, you start to become more aware. You get smarter. You stop doing things the same way, and eventually you do things totally different. But it's that experience of falling in the hole and the wisdom that you gain from it each time that helps you choose a different path in the end. So keep going, because when you reach that point of stopping, of giving up, that is exactly when you should keep going, because that is when the breakthroughs happen. And often the breakdowns. But remember, you have to have a breakdown if you want to have a breakthrough. Napoleon Hill shares a story in his book, Think and Grow Rich, about R.U. Darby. Darby was a millionaire, but the defining moment of his life occurred prior to his making millions, when he had no money and thought he had no luck. And it taught him to understand and appreciate the power of persistence. You see, Darby and his uncle went west during the gold rush and initially discovered gold in their mine in Colorado. Now, they got very excited and they were told that this could lead to one of the richest mines in Colorado, wipe out their debt, and leave them very, very rich. But all of a sudden, the vein of gold that they were mining just disappeared. Day after day, they drilled with no luck. They went deeper in debt, and eventually they decided to quit. They sold the drill and the mine to a local junk man, and they went home. But the junk man had other ideas, and he enlisted the help of a mining engineer whose expert opinion was that Darby and his uncle were just 3 feet from a hugely profitable vein of gold when they stopped drilling. So the junk man continued to drill where Darby and his uncle left, and he ended up making millions from the gold vein that was just 3 feet away from where Darby and his uncle quit. You see, the junk man was smart enough to know what he didn't know. He sought expert counsel. He did something different. He was persistent. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Darby eventually became a millionaire later in life, and he attributes his tenacity and persistence in doing so to this event. And speaking of gold, my guest today, Dr. Jeff Spencer, was a part of the 1972 U.S. Olympic cycling team and has worked on and alongside some of our generation's greatest achievers. Sir Richard Branson, Tiger Woods, Lance Armstrong, Bono and U2, Olympic gold medalists and world champions, as well as playwrights, entrepreneurs, and others. Persistence and not giving up, even when you so desperately want to, is the backbone of success. And my interview with Dr. Jeff Spencer today will help us to understand why. So, Dr. Jeff Spencer, welcome, first of all. We're talking about a big topic today, persistence. How we keep going when all you want to do is stop, because we've all had those moments.
Yep.
So, when we're in it, and we're going for the gold, or we're going for whatever it is that we want. Could be something much smaller, much bigger, depending on the person. And we just want to stop. How do we keep going? What's the secret?
I think it's great. Well, I think the first thing is to understand our psychology. We have really two parts to our makeup. We have a champion's nature, and then we also have human nature. And human nature is high speed. It gets first dibs at every moment. It's survival based. It's also based on fear. And so when we get to those moments, it's really quite interesting because we actually have a greater confidence in our ability to fail when we operate on that system. Whereas the champion, really understands that when you hit a roadblock, it's actually one step closer to actually achieving the goal. And it's not a matter of necessarily looking at the finish line, but looking at what has to be executed next to be able to carry momentum forward.
Yeah. So I have the two, the human, the champion. That's great. Is there something special built into gold medalists and all of these super achievers that you've worked with that maybe they have that the rest of us don't?
Okay, well, that's actually a myth. It's like nobody's born a champion. I mean, people they're coached, and they're also cultivated over time with the skill set that they've learned. It's like these guys consistently produce platinum records year after year because they understand the process to be able to get there, that they've learned and rehearsed and have applied, and eventually that's now become the template by which they engage every day with.
Template, that's interesting. Yeah. So they have, it almost seems like there's a framework in that.
That's right.
But is that the secret? Is it having a framework or a template to follow day after day that gets us to where we want to go in our lives to make us those champions?
It really is. And it's really a structure about really interpreting the circumstances that we're engaging. People would say, well, now I don't have the motivation to do it because I don't have the passion that I used to have. Therefore, maybe I should get out while I still have at least some resources left. And that's not the way a champion looks at it. They look at it, well, we expect the honeymoon to wear off, and what that reality check actually means is that we're actually one step closer to moving forward to be able to achieving our goal. So oftentimes what we think it to be is not what it is at all.
That's so interesting. And you mentioned those roadblocks. Like, we hit roadblocks, and I think that's when we want to give up. We're dieting,
Absolutely.
We've fallen off the wagon.
Absolutely.
I knew I couldn't do this anyway. I don't want to,
Absolutely.
or we're running a business or
Yeah.
trying to get there, and we're like, oh, this is,
Yeah.
so that, like, we want to stop. And I guess what I want to ask you is, sometimes should we stop?
I think there is a time to stop, but I think what's important is that we don't decide when that is. Because a lot of
What does
times
that mean?
we'll interpret things as being something different. So for example, we have the honeymoon's over. Well, that's actually a step that means that you're actually closer to where you want to be. But then to recognize on the other side of the reality check with the honeymoon being over as being a good sign, then there's usually the daily grind where you get up every day and you're putting one foot in front of the other and you're asking yourself, well, I'm certainly not getting what I had hoped I would have gotten thus far from the time and effort that I put into it. But that's actually when most people want to quit. But what's happening there is that you're actually building critical mass. You're actually building competency during that process. And then at a certain point, when the competency hits critical mass, kaboom, you blow the top on the volcano, and all of a sudden you have belief, you're over the hump, and now you see you can actually get there. So again, if we're left to our own devices, sometimes we can interpret things in a way that they're not. And it's always good to have counsel behind the scenes that help us understand what it is that we're encountering as to how we should proceed with it, and what is it that the champions know that we don't, that allows them to be such prolific, consistent winners.
That's so interesting. So that counsel, that person that we can go to, if not everyone has Dr. Jeff Spencer sitting in a chair in their home, what do they do when they get to that place and they think, whoa, I don't know if this is when I should keep going because I'm so close, or if this is the point where I just need to call it a day? Like, how do they know?
I think, again, that goes back to good counsel. And it's always important before you begin a process to make sure that you've got someone in your corner that's watching your back, that's experienced in what it is that you're pursuing, that can interpret exactly where you are. Is it the right pacing? Are the right timelines being met? Are you really on track? So to set that up in advance is always the best thing to do. It's always a good idea to have a map before you go into the jungle. Yeah, most people don't do that. You know, they race off into the jungle, then when they're lost, they look for the map. So you set that up in advance. But then again, if you don't have that and you encounter something that requires you to sort of consider, should I or shouldn't I, then the next thing I would suggest doing, you know, my program, the Champions Blueprint, is just exclusively really about that. It's being able to not only interpret where you are and what history tells us about where we are, and tells us, are we running a pattern that sounds so good but yet delivers so wrong?
Right.
And if that's the case, maybe we should apply a principle that allows us to carry momentum forward. And then if we can identify where we are and we know where we're headed, you can peek around the corner and you can see what's coming, so you can take evasive action, a preemptive strike against things that could take you out of the game.
On a personal level, do you follow the Champions Blueprint? Like, has that been the pattern for your life?
It was actually birthed out of my 50 years of being in the high performance space. You know, as an Olympian myself, I was an Olympic cyclist, so I know what it's like to compete at the top. And you know, I have a master's degree in sports science, et cetera. So I've had really the blessing of working with some of the most prolific achievers on the planet. You know, spent time with you too, and you know, other people running at that level in sport, in business, on stage, and in life. So what happened is that, having helped people become prolific performers, and Olympians win gold medals, businessmen make millions, and thought leaders move to the highest level, I saw and wrote exactly what I saw that they did, and I looked for the common thread. And I realized that there's 8 steps that every prolific performer goes through that develops a certain competency or skill that ultimately gives them the readiness to be able to achieve their champion goals while avoiding preventable problems without losing time and momentum.
That's amazing. And this is adaptable to anyone. Again, we don't have to be going for that gold medal. For moms or career women, or anyone that's watching the show, this is a step-by-step method that you've created that works for all of us, right?
Yeah, it's actually the only thing that's never let me down in life, because it was born out of observation. And you know, the goals that we decide to pursue, those are personalized. Whether it's to bake the best cookie in town, or whether it's a gold medal, it doesn't matter. You know, what does matter is that it's something that we're passionate about, and it's part of the legacy that we're going to leave that will be assigned to others about what we did with our life and what we did with our talents.
Yeah. You mentioned there's 8 steps to the Champions Blueprint. Can you share with us quickly what those are?
Yeah. Step number 1 is a legacy. It always starts with a legacy. It's like, how do we want...
Starts with the legacy.
Starts with our legacy.
I would have thought it would have ended with
one.
one.
Most people do, but the reason why it starts with legacy is it gives us a chance to look at, on our current trajectory, is this the life that we really want to leave? Because if it's not, then we have a chance to change the course correct to be able to manifest that. Step number 2 is vision. And it's not vision in a sense that most people think it of as a goal. It's really, how do we see ourselves once we've achieved our goal? And then step number 3 is mindset. Mindset in this case is, do you really know what it's going to take? And are you really ready to do this? And step number 4 is inventory, meaning that, do we have the personal resources, the knowledge and the skill, and do we have the material resources, time, space, financing, team?
It's such a great, we're at step 4, so we're halfway through, but this is such a beautiful way. This is the structure.
That's correct. And you're vetting your goal against this, because if the goal isn't consistent with your legacy, then you don't pursue it. So what this does, this really vets, and it gives you safety and security, knowing that you're prepared to be able to do this if you'd answered all those questions correctly.
Right.
So once we've gotten there, then we move to the second half, which is the performance side. And the 5th step is called the climb. And this is where, like, you open the doors to the business. This is where you're actually pursuing the goal. And this is where you're developing persistence, which is the topic that we're discussing here. But the endpoint of that is that you have a breakout performance where for the first time you're performing at a level consistent with your ambition or your goal. So once you have your breakout, then that's step 6, which then is elevation. And this is where when you've had your first experience performing at the level of your aspiration, where you know you can now do it, then you have to duplicate that. You need to develop it and you need to iterate it so that you actually own the technical process of performing at that level. And once you've done that, then you're performing at the top of your game. And the step above that, once you've kind of mastered the technical side, is to realize that now you have to adapt to performing at that level, realizing that not everybody's going to like the fact that you've now taken your life to a different level.
Yeah.
So, when we've gotten there, we've really mastered the process. We've really mastered the technical process of achieving our goal. We've actually also adapted to the highest level of dealing with people. And then we got one more step.
And that is?
Step number 8, and that's called the wave. And that's probably the most difficult of all because that's where we have to develop mastery over self. And when we get to the top of our game, it's really important that we be selective about the goals that we pursue, that we have appropriate ambition, so that we extend the lifespan of our ability to produce at a very high level, so we add the most significant number and magnitude of successes to our legacy in the making. But there also is a big caution here too, is that too much success can create success intoxication, meaning that a person starts to overestimate their value. They start taking high degrees of risk in certain things that can be extremely detrimental to them. I've seen people throw away a lifetime of achievement by doing one amateurish mistake that could have been completely prevented. So once we kind of master ourselves, then we have what I call the champion's capacity to manifest champion goals.
That's so impressive. And those 8 steps, they're a blueprint.
What this allows us to do is accurately determine what is it that we need to do now accurately, and also know it's coming so we're never taken by surprise.
That's so interesting. I think that you identify that before we know we're going to need it.
And if we know what that is and we see that we're running that pattern silently, then we can apply a principle to it to neutralize it, to be able to carry our momentum forward.
One of the things that I find is so interesting, you say this, and you say it on your website, that some of the big things that master coaches teach, things like mindset, isn't the big picture. It isn't the final deal. Or what are we missing, maybe? Because we hear things like, okay, mindset and hard work and determination, but there's something more.
It's beautiful, So here's the myth.
Okay.
So the myth, if we look at the conventional achievement model, it goes something like this. Dream really big, and then you're going to work really hard, and then you're going to close the gap by working really hard to achieve your goal. And that hasn't proven itself to be true.
Not at all.
Because people look at the gap as an empty space to be closed. If it's an empty space or a void, it actually is a vacuum. And the champion's blueprint, what I've observed, and the myth is that this is not a void. The gap is not a void. The gap is actually a living, breathing space that has to be maintained and cultivated. So when we hit these early blocks, then we think that we're the problem. And you can't mind over matter yourself through a process that you don't have the skill to get through.
You mentioned when you were going through the 8 steps of the blueprint, it's like almost like celebrating those little victories. Does that keep us going? Is that one of the keys to staying?
It does, because what it is, it's a reality check, and it's actually a validation that what we're doing is the right thing. And there's nothing more catastrophic than for me to see someone with amazing talent that's just got an amazing goal, that has amazing capability, stall in the process because they didn't do their homework.
That's so interesting. And, I keep saying, but we could use this for everything, right? And I think that people might discount this big plan that you have, this really amazing step-by-step process, and think, well, I don't really need that. I'm just trying to lose some weight.
Well, you do, because if you look at the 8 steps, legacy, you have to say, well, I want to lose weight. Well, how does this fit into how I want to be known as? So legacy statement's important, your vision. Vision's big, and the same thing with mindset. It's like, you better know what it's going to take to do that, otherwise you're going to talk yourself out of it.
Truly amazing. Jeff, thank you so much for your message and the work that you're doing in this world. So the name of the show is What You're Really Hungry For. So I want to ask you, and I've asked every guest that comes on, what are you really hungry for?
I won't accept the fact that people don't have a method and a model that enables them to connect and be the best that they can be and leave a legacy that they're proud of, that outlasts them. that calls people to a higher game, and it allows them to live a life of passion and purpose and productivity and prosperity that they deserve, and also leave an immense contribution to other people. And that's why the Champion Blueprint is my life mission.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. You're changing lives everywhere. You're truly helping people create legacies that they can be proud of, and you're influencing all of us in such a major way. So thank you for the work that you do in the world. Thank you for being you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
This week is all about persistence and not giving up even when you really, really want to. So I invite you to choose one of Dr. Jeff Spencer's tips that he discussed during our show and start implementing it into your life today. What one thing can you do to keep going, to not lose focus at those last 3 feet, to make sure that you strike gold? As always, the conversation continues over at cynthiapasquella.com. So head on over there and leave a comment below this video telling me the one thing that you will do to keep going today. And while you're there, make sure you download today's free menu to track your progress. You'll find inspirational quotes from today's show and a daily checklist that will help keep you on track. It's located right below this video at cynthiapasquella.com. And did you like this video? If you did, please subscribe. And I'd be ever so grateful if you would share it with your friends. And if you want to hear more from me, including stuff that I only talk about in email, then come on over to cynthiapasquella.com and sign up for my email newsletter so you can become a part of this beautiful community of women who are discovering what they're really hungry for. This episode is brought to you by the Institute of Transformational Nutrition. Discover the secrets to becoming a go-to expert in nutrition coaching while making great money on the side or even enjoying a new career at www.transformationalnutrition.com. On next week's episode of What You're Really Hungry For.
If somebody's why, if their motivating factor is just to lose weight, it won't work. It won't work because it's not important enough to them. You know?
But why is it not important enough? Can we talk about that for just a moment? Because I feel like in so many people's lives,